Ready? 3, 2, 1. Welcome, Bulldog fans, to a fast emptied out Scott Field Davis Wade Stadium. Steve, all of our pickers selected Mississippi State to win this game, but we all agreed it would be a very tight, low-scoring game. That came true, but the lower scoring was on the Bulldog side today as Kansas State walks away with a 31-24 win.
It's true, David, and we talked, too, about special teams being a big play, and it was today. I mean, the defining moment of this ball game, after Mississippi State had wrestled control away, Kansas State, I don't know that I would say they dominated the first half, David, but they controlled the first half, and then State scores just before the half on a tremendous throw and catch from Tommy Stevens to Cyrus Mitchell. You felt like you had some juice coming out. Defense goes out, gets you a good play there. Next thing you know, State's trading back and forth, but you get a touchdown, you get the lead, and you get another drive. You have to settle for a field goal, but you just felt like, okay, well, you figured this thing out offensively and defensively, but you hadn't figured out special teams-wise. The next thing you know, a play later, it's a tie ball game.
Ironically, special teams were responsible for Mississippi State even being in the game in the first half, maybe the full game, but in a perverse way because the two worst punts of Tucker Day's day were dropped by the upback. Mississippi State takes those turnovers and scores twice. In fact, State scored, I think, 17 points off turnovers, you say in basketball. Now, Kansas State scored 10 points off turnovers. A sloppy game by both teams in that regard. But again, as you say, State is in position, whether they deserved it or not, to take control of the game. As Brian Cole said, he was expecting to go another 3 and out, get back in the field, and put the game away. It didn't happen because of an end-to-end kickoff return.
It did, David, and then even when State had a chance to kind of get back in there, I mean, it's a 3rd and 2 play. You've had a couple positive gains, and then we elect to throw a pass play there. And, I'm not one to kind of question play calling, but I'm going to question that play call. Where you got a true freshman quarterback in there and you've got a running back that had shredded these guys last year, and you finally got some things going. You had 2 positive gains, and you elect to throw a slant, and the ball goes behind him, and we punt and have to get the ball back. And it just seemed like when that play happened, it seemed like the wind kind of went out of the Bulldog sails, and then late in the ball game when it was time to make a play, State simply couldn't make one.
I'm going to build on that a little bit. It was a little disturbing to me. Let's set aside the plays that weren't executed, the plays that were strangely called. I was frustrated by the emotions I saw on the sideline in the second half there. It was a team that really, even when they had the lead, weren't that confident they were going to take control of it. And once the game's back tied, you'd almost think, what's going to happen now? Maybe it was just this day. Maybe a lot of things factored into that. But that was a little disappointing to me.
Well, I thought the third quarter, State probably played their best football of the day. The fourth quarter, it did seem like we were just kind of waiting around for something to happen. And I don't know if it's a conscious decision, but it seems like sometimes State was scared to go win the ball game. It was like because Garrett Schrader was at the quarterback, and at times he admits that sometimes the playbook is somewhat scaled back until he gets in the flow of the game, and he's a competitive player. But the bottom line is, without Tommy Stevens, you're a different team out here. Garrett Schrader gave you a great effort, came up just a little bit short. Literally and figuratively, David, on that an incredible play on that 4th down play. I mean, and in the press game, in the post game, David, he's saying, "Hey, I should have stretched it out." I don't know if anybody in their world is thinking that when they're doing a helicopter, thinking, "Hey, I need to stretch the ball out." But that just says what kind of moxie the kid's got. And we again, 2 weeks with him at the helm, I think we can feel good about the future. But today doesn't feel so good.
Yeah, I think you're right that if Tommy Stevens plays the whole game, State probably ekes out a win. Again, whether they deserve it or not, because the first half was pretty rough there. Stevens, you could tell, was not 100%. He looked great on that throw to Mitchell. He made some good throws. But as they said, the shoulder stiffened up in halftime. They got him out there one series. He throws a really bad interception, which oddly enough ends up being fumbled on the return, so State gets away with that. But immediately the coaching staff says, no, we just can't risk this guy anymore. Schrader, to his credit, does what he can within that playbook. But again, kind of a strange call in that corner pattern they ran when they had a chance there. Now, credit to Jace Crispin. He walked up, knocked through, tied a career-long field goal. So State made enough plays in the second half. But really the game got away in the first half because even though 17-14 at halftime, Kansas State's running the ball somewhat effectively, and their play action was working because State had to focus on the run so much.
It was, and David, that's kind of been a consistent theme. You know, State a little more linebacker-friendly today, and the stats kind of show that. We said it was going to be a linebacker-centric game. It was, but there was still some play action stuff where you put some guys in coverage, and we talked to Brian Cole about it. They had 3 plays that we remember where the tight end is able to leak out essentially wide open. One time, Skylar Thompson simply missed him. It would have been a walk-in touchdown. A couple other times he didn't miss him. But that's something that you don't expect from Bob Shoop defense. And Brian Cole even said at times it's so simple, it confuses you a little bit because you're expecting a little more to it. They give you some eye candy and they get you looking one direction, and they do just some basic plays, and next thing you know, they've got a guy in space.
I think the disappointing thing, too, is in the first half, State's offensive line got little to nothing going. Now, part of that was simply that once Kansas State realized that Tommy Stevens was not going to be able to tuck and run a la Nick Fitzgerald last season, they could focus on Kylan Hill. And they made Kylan work for every yard, sometimes not even getting yards was a great accomplishment for him and not losing. But they knew they could play it that way. In the second half, of course, he broke some more things open. And I thought Steve had this game started at 1 o'clock instead of 11 o'clock. It might have turned out differently as well, because you could tell in the second half when things warmed up, Kansas State started getting gassed there. But it was just a case of a little too late for the Bulldogs to use their opportunities.
And, David, I was gassed. I mean, I cannot begin to imagine having to put on a helmet and shoulder pads. And, tip of the cap to our fans that came out. And it was not a crowd that it's going to make any record books. But the people that were here were into the ball game. And it was not football conditions, but they were here and late in the ball game when State needed them. The ones that remained here on campus were very much in the ball game, and so again, great for those Bulldog fans. But David, you're right about the heat. Kansas State, it seemed, was really wearing down, which is one of the things that makes it a little bit perplexing why you would make some of those play calls. As Kylan Hill finally had some momentum, finally able to fall forward, and he ran with anger the whole ball game. You could tell he wanted to put this game on his back. And when you finally begin to have some success, you kind of take the ball out of your playmaker's hands there. I just thought it was kind of a perplexing play call.
I spoke to Darrell Williams after the game, and he said he was having to hold on to the ball a little bit longer on his snaps, which contributed to some of the high or loose snaps he was making. Why that's so, he didn't really go into detail on, but you could tell that the confidence even was missing a little bit. Just the timing was not quite there with an offensive line we've seen do good things. But give Kansas State credit. They had a good defensive scheme. They kept it simple on offense. As the players we talked to in defense said, Tim Washington, Brian Cole, they just ran downhill. They didn't try anything fancy, and I think State, they're so used to game planning for exotic offenses that they were almost not ready for a team that just ran power, 2 tight ends or a tight end, a fullback, and they got outmatched. You mentioned the linebackers, and that leads to a subject that we'll be bringing up this week. Should this have been a game that State used Lee Autry and Willie Gay? We assume, of course, they all have 4 games available. You'd have liked to have another experienced linebacker in there, and now you're in a position you just about have to use them in the 4 presumably winnable SEC games.
Yeah, I would think so, David. And we have talked all year long about when is the best time to take them. And I think the bottom line is you don't play them in non-conference games and you don't play them in the 4 road games. But when you begin to kind of look at some of these winnable ball games, a game like next week, I would not be the least bit surprised if everybody is pressing the service next week and Kentucky comes to town, because that now becomes a much more important game. It always was a big one because it's the SEC opener, but now that you drop this ball game, to have any momentum in the bowl pecking order, you've got to beat Kentucky.
And that's what we were talking about post-game, too. A game like today is the difference between a pretty good mid-level bowl and then trying to fight to stay out of something like the Liberty Bowl or others like that, which I know the fans love the Liberty. They do a good job, but you're gotten spoiled by the bowls you go to with this program now. 7 wins is certainly not a given now with this team, but the opportunity is still there. We've seen some good young talent. We know what a healthy Tommy Stevens and Kylan Hill together can do, and you're not going to face a lot of teams that just take that downhill power attack that you saw today from Kansas State. So certainly the opportunity is there next week against Kentucky, but State's got to get some guys healthy, and I think they've got to take stock of some of the play calling, and they certainly got to fix the special teams. And if there's not a change made coming up, you start to wonder, what's going on? Do they really understand what the problem is, or are they determined to fix it?
Well, David, we've had special teams miscues in all 3 games this year. It wasn't so bad last week. Very apparent in game 1, very apparent today. And it's just such a momentum killer when, again, you finally have control of the ball game. You finally have your crowd fully engaged. You have had 2 back-to-back scoring drives. You just feel like, okay, we're on the verge of putting this thing away. And one play makes all the difference. And that's really the defining play of the day, David, is that kickoff return. And listen, Jaquarius Landrews gave all he had. He wasn't running away from Capri, but Capri wasn't catching him. And, you tip of the cap to Knowles. And this is a good Kansas State team. And then I think in the preseason, some people probably discounted them a little bit.
I know I did.
I did too. They're a good team. But if you had told me that we had held them to 146 yards rushing in the pregame, I'd say we won the game handily. We didn't because of the fact Knowles had the big kickoff return there that really, really gave them the life they needed to put the game away.
We're not going to go through the statistics. I think you fans can look at it and say, wait a minute. As badly as State appeared to play in so many areas, they still won the statistical battle in yardage with passing and rushing, certainly won the turnover battle. They had a few penalties that really were frustrating there, and some frustration penalties as well that maybe don't speak to good emotional control situations as well. So, and the game got a little chippy down there at times too, but that's what happens this time of year. So, Coach Joe Moorhead and his staff have a lot to fix ahead, and I like what Osiris Mitchell said. He was going straight from here to watch film and then to Palmyra to start catching some more balls and working on a few things. So they were frustrated, they're angry, but they've got to fix it themselves before they host the Kentucky Wildcats.
They do, David. And there's some frustrated fans out there tonight, and rightfully so. This is a ball game that Mississippi State should have won, and I'm not going to get into this back and forth to people on Twitter. The bottom line is this: Mississippi State should have won the ball game. Mississippi State was the better team, played in their home arena. Yes, you had Tommy Stevens less than 100%, but Mississippi State lost the ball game today. And it is something now that I think sets a dangerous tone for the rest of the season, especially with the fan base that was upset last week about not able to get bottled water or whatever. Now all of a sudden you've got this, and now it feels like State is chasing the season. You've got to go out there now and probably get an upset to kind of right the balance.
So, not a lot of sunshine and rainbows here today at Scott Field, obviously, but next week's a new week. Monday we'll have our press conference with Joe Moorhead at 12:30, and Steve and I will give you a wrap-up on that. And expect some interesting questions about lineup and availabilities, and certainly the injury updates as well going into it. But bottom line, Bulldogs lose a non-conference game. First Power 5 non-conference loss since, 2009 on this field. First non-conference loss period on this field since 2016. It's a little painful to take when you've gotten used to better, but it's a reminder that every game is a battle this season, and we don't expect anything less from next week. 3 o'clock kickoff against the University of Kentucky. Between then, we'll be talking to you. Our staff is getting our stories and material ready to report for the rest of the day, and then we're going to go home and watch some football and relax. So for Steve Robertson and our team at GeneSpace 24/7 from Scott Field, this is David Murray.